Can you imagine the 7-time world champion frustrated because that is happening? What has led Hamilton to the border with Ferrari? Let's discover it. From the moment Lewis Hamilton confirmed his signing by Ferrari, the narrative of the year changed radically. The movement was considered one of the bolder and most surprising in the recent history of Formula One. It was not only the change of team of a superstar, it was the reunion of two legends. On the one hand, the most successful pilot of all time in terms of championships and victories. On the other, the team with the greatest legacy in the category, desperate to recover its place at the top after years of frustration. Ferrari sold it as a new beginning, a custom project, a completely redesigned car, a technical culture renewed under the direction of Frédéric Vasseur. Everything sounded well, but that optimism faded quickly. The pre-season left ambiguous signals. Yes, the SF-25 was a more aggressive car in terms of aerodynamic design and mechanical configuration, but it was also visibly unstable. What began as uncertainty soon became disappointment. Already in the first race of the season in Australia, reality hit hard. Hamilton, far from the top positions, only managed to add 1 point. The car was not only slow compared to McLaren and Red Bull, it was also uncomfortable to pilot. The traction at the exit of slow curves was deficient. The balance changed with each change in track temperature, and the SF-25 seemed to have an extremely narrow operational window. The feeling was that Ferrari had built a car that only worked under almost perfect conditions that rarely occur in Formula One. But beyond the results on the track, the most revealing was Hamilton's emotional evolution. The British, always calculating in his statements, began to suggest an unusual frustration in him. In China, I already talked about lack of trust with the car. In Monaco, he avoided going into details after being out of the podium. And in Canada, it exploded. His comparison of the car with someone who does not know how to dance was more than a technical criticism. It was an emotional confession. Hamilton is not only disappointed with performance, it is hurt. Because this stage in Ferrari was not a simple change of equipment. It was, for him, the possibility of closing his career at the top, with a project that also immortalized him with red. The press, fans, and even former pilots began to wonder if this was a calculation error. Was Hamilton wrong to leave Mercedes just when they began to stabilize their performance? Did Ferrari overestimate his technical capacity? Was more an emotional decision than sports? And perhaps the most painful question of all, is it possible that this signing ends up tarnishing the legacy of one of the greatest pilots of all time? The truth is that this broken promise is not limited to disappointing results. It is a story of inflated expectations, of poorly placed faith, and a machinery that has not lived up to the historical moment that it intended to build. At first glance, the SF-25 seems like a revolutionary car. Ferrari not only changed his aerodynamic philosophy, but also his concept of suspension, seeking to break with the structural limitations that dragged from previous seasons. The redesign included a bold transition, leaving behind the pushrod front suspension to adopt a pull rod. In theory, this modification would allow a more efficient airflow to the rear of the car, a critical area in terms of aerodynamic load and car balance. However, what promised to be an evolution has become a constant source of problems. The true Achilles heel of the SF-25 is located in the back. The rear pull rod suspension configuration, together with a poorly calibrated rigidity, has generated erratic and highly unpredictable behavior. Ferrari has failed to find a stable configuration, and this has direct consequences. Premature wear of the flat background, aerodynamic load collapse in high-speed curves, and an extremely reduced operating window. In technical terms, the car fails to maintain a constant body height, which destroys the efficiency of aerodynamic flow and seriously affects the general stability of the car. In real career conditions, this means that engineers are forced to compromise performance. To avoid violating the regulation by wear of the flat background, as already happened with the disqualification of Hamilton in China, they must increase the height of the car. But in doing so, a critical amount of aerodynamic load is lost, particularly in medium and high-speed curves. This is a dilemma without an easy solution. Either they risk technical sanctions or resign to compete with an unbalanced car. In addition, the problem is not static. Change track on track and often session in session. In Monaco, for example, SF-25 was unstable in all slow curves, forcing pilots to constantly fight with the steering wheel. In Montreal, the problem worsened with the sudden change of weather conditions. Every time the track changes, the car loses reference, and with it, the pilots lose confidence. In that context, the maximum performance cannot be extracted, even if the pilot's talent is up to it. The most alarming thing is that, according to multiple sources within the paddock, this is not an easy solution problem. It is not a matter of a new spoiler or an adjusted diffuser. It is a concept failure. The base architecture of the car does not allow adapting to the modern demands of the current F1 calendar, where versatility is key. Ferrari opted for an aggressive design, but that aggressiveness is taking its toll. The data show that the loss of aerodynamic load in situations of high compression of the background is one of the most pronounced in the entire grille. Internally, engineers know it. They have tried multiple solutions: structural reinforcements, geometry adjustments, mass redistribution. Nothing has worked consistently. They have even had to delay planned improvements to avoid worsening the situation. The pressure on the technical department is immense, and with each passing race, the margin of maneuver is reduced. All this translates into a progressive loss of performance, but also in an erosion of the morale of the team. For Hamilton, this technical chaos is especially frustrating. He is used to working with refined machines, with teams that dominate the art of technical evolution. What finds now is a team trapped by its own design. And that, in a sport where the tenths define races, can be the difference between glory and irrelevance. For Lewis Hamilton, every season in Formula One has a different weight. At 40, his permanence in the category is no longer about competing. It's about leaving a legacy, adding one last page to a race that redefined modern motoring. But this stage with Ferrari, which in theory should be the climax in its history, is becoming an emotional and strategic nightmare that raises more questions than answers. Hamilton has not reached Maranello to be a media symbol or to close his career with nostalgia. He came to win. To put in the Ferrari showcase an 8th title that would break all records and return the Scuderia to its place of privilege. But the car they gave it is not up to it, and that creates an increasingly difficult internal conflict. The pilot who once was synonymous with technical perfection and absolute trust, now doubts, is frustrated, and most worrying, begins to resign. Since his arrival, he has tried to adapt to a new environment, different in philosophy and methods regarding Mercedes. He changed his driving style to align with the demands of the SF-25, adopting a more aggressive technique in passing through medium curve, modifying his braking sequence, and even replicating the telemetry of Charles Leclerc in search of some reference that would allow him to get more out of the car. But these adjustments have not been enough, and that adaptation process, which many believed that it would be instantaneous because of their experience, has become much slower and painful than expected. Every race weekend is a new frustration exercise. Instead of fighting for pole or victory, Hamilton is caught in battles to enter Q3 or by adding marginal points. Under changing conditions such as those lived in Montreal or in the chaotic GP of Australia, strategic errors and lack of rhythm have even prevented him from approaching the podium. The most symbolic thing was to see him trapped behind clearly lower cars, unable to advance due to the instability of the SF-25 in traction and braking. And meanwhile, off track, the questions do not stop. Is this the competitive end of Hamilton? Can he endure another year under these conditions? Are you willing to continue in a project that, for now, does not seem to be at its height? Because the reality is clear. Ferrari is far from offering a champion car. McLaren has taken the lead with a balanced, fast and reliable car. Red Bull, despite his political instability and the Lawson case, continues to have Verstappen as an unbeatable reference point on several clues. Mercedes, without being brilliant, shows signs of recovery. Ferrari, on the other hand, is still caught in a technical and conceptual limbo. In that context, Hamilton faces a personal and professional dilemma. Your contract is not eternal. Is patience either? It could stay and wait for the 2026 technical regulations, where all teams will start from scratch, and perhaps Ferrari can redeem there. But that means 2 more years of wear, disappointments and possible erosion of its legacy. The other option is to retreat, admit that this project did not work, and consider a decent retreat, without continuing to drag a performance that does not reflect its true capacity. And beyond what he decides, there is also the position of the team. Will they continue blindly betting on a project that does not deliver results? Or will they seek to reconfigure their technical template, their internal leadership, and even their complete design philosophy? External pressure is immense. Each lost race, every wasted opportunity, is one more blow to the credibility of Ferrari and the heroic narrative they tried to build with the arrival of Hamilton. The situation is so complex that even in the paddock halls it begins to speculate. If there is no drastic improvement in the next races, there could be deep changes in the direction of the team. Or even if it sounds unthinkable, an early exit of the 7-time champion. Time is exhausted. And while the questions grow, the answers are scarce. Hamilton is at the most delicate moment of his career. And Formula One observes, expectant, if this chapter with Ferrari will be his redemption, or its greatest disappointment. Ferrari, in his attempt to return to the top, opted for the figure of Hamilton as a catalyst for a new winning cycle. But so far that cycle has not started. The car does not respond, the team doubts, and the most decorated pilot of all time is in an unusual situation, running in the middle of the platoon, fighting against cars that on paper should not even compete. And now the question not only falls on the present, it goes further. Does Ferrari have the ability to redesign not only his car, but his way of operating, his technical culture, his relationship with his pilots? Is Hamilton ready to load with that weight in the coming years? Or this could be the trigger for an unexpected ending in his legendary career? We want to listen to you. Do you think SF-25 can improve this season? Or are we facing one of the greatest disappointments in the recent history of Formula One? What would you do if you were Lewis Hamilton? Leave us your opinion in the comments.